Earl Bradley, often considered the most horrific pedophile in U.S. history. He molested some 103 children as young as 3 months old while working as a Lewis pediatrician. He is currently behind bars serving multiple life sentences.
February 2010. America was shaken by the revelations of Earl Brian Bradley's horrifying crimes. The Delaware Superior Court indicted him on an unimaginable 471 charges, including rape and exploitation. Prosecutors identified 103 victims, though they believed there were many more. The scale of Bradley's abuse was beyond belief, forever marking him as one of the worst child predators in U.S. history. It all started so innocently. Born on May 10, 1953, Earl Brian Bradley seemed destined for success. Raised in a typical middle-class family, he excelled in school, the kind of student everyone thought would go on to do great things. And he did, or so it appeared. By 1983, Bradley had earned his medical degree, choosing to specialize in pediatrics, a field where he could work closely with children. His warm, friendly demeanor made him a natural fit. Kids loved him, parents trusted him. He had a knack for using humor, colorful outfits, and toys to make visits to the doctor feel less scary. To everyone around him, he seemed to genuinely care for the children in his care. By the late 1980s, Bradley's reputation as a pediatrician was solid. He became well known for his unique ability to comfort even the most nervous child, turning what could be a terrifying experience into something fun. When he moved to the quiet coastal town of Lewis, Delaware in 1995 and opened Baby's Pediatrics, the community welcomed him with open arms. Lewis, with its close-knit families and small-town charm, felt like the perfect place for someone like him. His clinic wasn't just any pediatric office either. It was brightly decorated, with a carnival-like atmosphere. There were toys everywhere, and the walls were painted with cheerful colors. Parents were grateful for Bradley's attention to their children's health, often remarking how lucky they felt to have such a dedicated pediatrician in their small town. For many families, he seemed to be the answer to their prayers, someone who made their children laugh and put them at ease. But behind this carefully crafted facade, a nightmare was brewing, one that no one could have imagined. The first whispers of something being wrong began years earlier, in the early 1990s, when Bradley was still working in Philadelphia. A nurse there had raised concerns about his inappropriate behavior with young patients. However, no serious investigation followed. He simply relocated to Delaware, leaving behind the suspicions and the unsettling rumors. For years, he continued working as the trusted pediatrician, hiding in plain sight. It was only later that the horrifying truth about Earl Brian Bradley would come to light, shocking the very community that had once welcomed him with open arms. By 1996, Bradley had set up shop in Lewis, Delaware, where subtle complaints started to trickle in from concerned parents. A few raised red flags, whispering that something didn't seem right during their children's appointments. These concerns, though, were quickly dismissed as overprotective parents misinterpreting a doctor's care. After all, Bradley's reputation was stellar. He had an easy smile, a friendly demeanor, and a resume that screamed respectability. No one wanted to believe that anything sinister could be happening. Parents trusted him implicitly, while their children often lacked the vocabulary or understanding to describe what was really going on behind closed doors. For nearly a decade, Bradley continued his practice uninterrupted. Parents came and went, placing their children's well-being in his hands, unaware of the quiet storm brewing. Between 1996 and 2000, those subtle complaints began to pile up, but still no action was taken. The local medical boards and authorities downplayed the reports, chalking them up to misunderstandings. Bradley's charm and spotless credentials kept him shielded from scrutiny. He was the doctor everyone trusted, even though whispers were slowly growing louder. By 2005, things took a more serious turn. A formal complaint was filed, accusing Bradley of inappropriate behavior during an exam. Finally, it seemed like this might be the moment where his facade cracked. But once again, nothing came of it. No formal charges were filed, and Bradley went back to his business as usual. The complaints were forgotten, left to fade into the background like so many others before. What made the situation even more unsettling was the fact that Bradley's own sister, who worked in his office, had reached out to the police the same year in 2005. She had told them that her brother was bipolar, that he was taking medication from the office, and that, yes, several patients had complained about his inappropriate behavior with young patients. Despite these alarming revelations, no concrete steps were taken. 2 pediatricians also spoke to investigators in 2005, corroborating the fact that Bradley had a pattern of complaints following him like a shadow. Former patients had raised concerns, and yet Bradley continued to practice. He remained untouchable, shielded by his reputation and the belief of those around him. For years, people turned a blind eye, preferring the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth. But everything changed in December 2009. During what should have been a routine exam, a 2-year-old girl screamed, something no one expected. Her reaction sent chills through her mother, who immediately sensed that something far more sinister was going on. Refusing to dismiss her suspicions, the mother pursued answers, and this persistence eventually led the Delaware State Police to take a closer look at Bradley. What they found was horrifying beyond belief. When investigators searched Bradley's property, they stumbled upon video recordings that would unravel the shocking truth. Over 13 hours of footage, meticulously filmed by Bradley himself, showing him sexually assaulting more than 100 young children. Most of them were girls, some as young as 3 months old. The pediatrician, someone's parents had trusted with their children's health, had secretly recorded these heinous acts under the guise of medical exams. He often wore a disguise or spoke softly, making the children feel safe. Many of his victims had been sedated, leaving them vulnerable and unaware of the full extent of his crimes. The recordings revealed Bradley's twisted method. Some of the footage was captured in his examination rooms, which were decorated with cheerful cartoon characters designed to put children at ease. Other videos were filmed in a secluded basement, far from prying eyes. He had carefully constructed an environment where his victims felt safe, only to betray that trust in the worst way imaginable. It's almost unimaginable to think that such abuse went on for so long, hidden in plain sight. Despite early complaints and warning signs, it took the brave scream of one girl and the determination of her mother to finally expose the dark secrets Bradley had been hiding for years. You'd think that when parents started expressing unease, someone might have stepped in, but Bradley had built a perfect smokescreen. His charismatic demeanor, paired with the trust that naturally comes with the title doctor, allowed him to keep his true nature hidden. Parents trusted him, often dismissing their children's vague feelings of discomfort. After all, who would think that a doctor, someone meant to care for their child, could be capable of such harm? This misplaced trust only gave Bradley more room to continue his abuse. And it wasn't just parents who were fooled. The Delaware Board of Medical Practice, the very body responsible for holding doctors accountable, failed at every turn. Red flags had been raised by other medical professionals, pointing to Bradley's suspicious behavior. But instead of launching a full investigation, they let him continue working, further endangering more children. How many could have been saved if the board had acted sooner? We'll never know for sure. The system had plenty of chances to stop him, but case after case was mishandled. Complaints were either dismissed or not taken seriously enough, leading to a decade of abuse that could have been prevented. While Bradley preyed on innocent children, institutions that should have protected them allowed him to keep going. It was a catastrophic failure at every level. Bradley's arrest on December 16, 2009, finally brought his reign of terror to an end. The investigation revealed overwhelming evidence of his abuse, making it impossible for anyone to turn a blind eye any longer. Authorities wasted no time setting his bail at a staggering $2.9 million in cash. But Bradley never saw the outside world again. His bail was never posted. Things took a darker turn as prison officials placed him on suicide watch, a decision Bradley's lawyer, Eugene Moorer, fiercely contested. Moorer argued that Bradley wasn't suicidal, but claimed that his client had been stripped of his prescription glasses, as if that was the real issue at hand. By February 2010, the depth of Bradley's depravity was laid bare. A grand jury for the Delaware Superior Court indicted him on 471 charges. Yes, 471, including rape and exploitation. The scale of the abuse was horrifying. Prosecutors initially identified 103 victims, but they were certain the real number was even higher. The details were nothing short of nightmarish, leaving the public in shock and disbelief. Bradley had videotaped many of his assaults, and these recordings revealed the full extent of his cruelty. In some footage, his young victims, some just infants, could be seen struggling to breathe as he forced oral sex on them, choking them until they lost consciousness. The videos also showed helpless children, still in diapers, screaming and desperately trying to escape from him. Bradley didn't care. He dragged them to an outbuilding on his property, where he continued his monstrous acts, far from prying eyes. For years, these children had been suffering unimaginable horrors, all while their parents trusted this man with their care, never suspecting the predator he truly was. It wasn't until Delaware authorities froze his assets that his private legal team abandoned him. Despite the mounting evidence and the horror of the charges, Bradley, ever defiant, pleaded not guilty when he was arraigned on March 24, 2010. He stood before the court with a public defender at his side, refusing to admit the atrocities he had committed against at least 127 children. His trial was set in motion, with a follow-up hearing scheduled for May 17th, but the gravity of the case had already shaken the entire state of Delaware. The Delaware Board of Medical Practice didn't waste time in permanently suspending Bradley's medical license on February 19, 2010, a small yet necessary step in ensuring he would never again harm another child under the guise of being their doctor. Governor Jack Markell was outraged, and rightly so. How could someone like Bradley continue his abuse for so long without being stopped? There had been failures at every level, medical, legal, and police, that allowed this nightmare to continue for more than a decade. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Markell called for an independent review of the entire situation. Widener University Law School Dean Linda Ammons was appointed to lead the investigation, a move that demonstrated just how serious the state was about uncovering the deep flaws in the system that had failed these children. But it wasn't just the medical board or the governor who were determined to see Bradley face justice. Delaware Attorney General Beau Biden, son of then Vice President Joe Biden, had been personally affected by the case. In January 2010, Biden made a significant decision. He announced that he would not run for the U.S. Senate seat once held by his father, choosing instead to focus on prosecuting Bradley. For him, there was no higher priority than ensuring that Bradley's victims, some of whom had barely begun to speak when they were assaulted, received the justice they deserved. In an effort to ensure fairness, Bradley's case was initially set to be tried in Sussex County, where the crimes occurred, but there was an immediate concern about finding an impartial jury. Why? Because many of the families of his 127 alleged victims lived right there in that same county. The fear was that emotions would run too high, so the trial was moved to Newcastle County in an attempt to give Bradley a fair shot. But then, in a surprising move, Bradley waived his right to a jury trial. No jury, no one deciding his fate except for a judge. This decision changed everything. With the jury out of the picture, the case was moved right back to Sussex County where it all began. Now it was up to one man to hear the evidence, and that man was Judge William C. Carpenter. The judge began to hear the chilling testimony and evidence on June 7, 2011. The courtroom was tense, with everyone waiting for the moment when justice would finally be served. Judge Carpenter, though, didn't rush. After hearing the evidence, he made it clear that he wasn't going to announce his verdict right away. He needed time to reflect on everything he had heard, and the world would have to wait. On June 23, 2011, the verdict was finally revealed. Bradley was found guilty on all 24 counts of a consolidated indictment, an indictment that once contained an overwhelming 529 counts. Of those charges, 14 were for rape, 7 for assault, and 3 for the sexual exploitation of a child. The outcome was devastating, but it was what everyone had hoped for: justice. But it didn't end there. On August 26, 2011, Judge Carpenter delivered a sentence that would leave no question about the fate of Bradley. He was sentenced to 14 consecutive terms of life in prison, the maximum sentence under Delaware law, and, as if it wasn't enough, an additional 165 years were added. There would be no chance of parole. Under Delaware law, if someone is convicted of raping 3 separate individuals, they automatically receive life without the possibility of parole. Bradley had far exceeded that. As Judge Carpenter delivered the final blow, he didn't hold back. He made it clear that Bradley had betrayed his patient's trust in a way that no one could ever forgive, and that the medical profession had been disgraced by his actions. "You will never be in a position to harm a child again," the judge said, ensuring that Bradley's days of freedom were over. The families of his victims and the community that had been shaken to its core finally saw justice done. Bradley, however, wasn't done fighting. He tried to appeal his conviction, taking his case to the Delaware Supreme Court. His argument? He claimed that the original search warrant, which led to the discovery of the evidence that brought him down, was too vague. According to him, the police had overstepped their boundaries by going beyond the limits of the warrant without proper cause. But his plea didn't make much of an impact. On September 6, 2012, the Delaware Supreme Court unanimously rejected his appeal, upholding the convictions. They didn't waver for a moment in their decision. As Bradley's fate was sealed, the remnants of his former life crumbled. His once bustling medical practice, housed in a prominent office complex, met its end on October 10, 2011. The entire complex was torn down, and in an almost poetic turn of events, the place where Bradley had once practiced medicine now hosts an Herbalife store, cheekily named Turtley Awesome Nutrition. The transformation of the space seemed to symbolize a final closure for the community. But there was more to the story. Not long after Bradley's arrest, the state police found the contents of his storage locker in Rehoboth Beach. Normally, these items would have been auctioned off to cover unpaid rent. However, in a rare move, Joe Biden, who was vice president at the time, stepped in on behalf of Bradley's victims. He arranged for the police to buy the entire contents of the locker for just $1. Why? To ensure that those items, whatever they were, would never, ever fall into the wrong hands or be misused in any way again. It was a powerful gesture, a way to erase the traces of Bradley's dark past and ensure that nothing connected to him could cause further harm. Bradley's crimes left a scar on the community, and even behind bars, the consequences of his actions rippled through the lives of many. From 2016, Bradley was housed in the Special Housing Unit, or SHU, at the James T. Vaughn Correctional Center in Newcastle County. But that arrangement didn't last. Delaware authorities realized that keeping him in state was problematic. Too many of his victims, or others affected by his actions, either worked in or were serving time in Delaware's prison system. The last thing anyone needed was for these victims to cross paths with the man who had shattered their lives. And so in 2016, Delaware made a significant decision. Bradley would be moved out of state to avoid further torment for those still grappling with the aftermath of his crimes. The destination, Connecticut's Cheshire Correctional Institution. Authorities in Connecticut confirmed that Bradley had been transferred to this facility, where he would spend the rest of his days far from Delaware. This case, from the office building's demolition to Biden's quiet yet profound intervention, shows how even in the wake of such horror, there can be efforts, however small, to protect the dignity and well-being of those who were hurt. So what do you think? Do you believe enough is being done to protect children from predators in our communities? How would you react if someone close to you became a victim?